all the Gospels do this, but I think Luke, among all four, is the most direct about this,
Okay.
about how Jesus is trying to. So this particular week that we're in, as we're recording this conversation, is we're in the season of Lent, and the Lent in the Christian liturgical calendar is capturing the stories of Jesus' life between the Mount of Transfiguration and Jesus' entry into Jerusalem for his final week, which we call Holy Week or the Passion Week. And during in the Gospel of Luke, Luke takes 10 chapters to tell the story of Jesus' journey and all of the teaching that Jesus does during this travel narrative. It's predominantly parables, excuse me, and most of it is in direct conversation with the Pharisees. And so to put some cultural context around it, I think Jesus loved the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were a group of Jewish leaders who, so I know we can't actually do this, but I try to play the mental game of what it must have been like to be a first century Palestinian Jew, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here you are, you're a people who have had hundreds of years of oppression, like multiple empires that have occupied your land. And you've spent centuries asking one big theological question: where is God?
Yeah.
Why, if we're the chosen ones, if God promised our father Abraham that we would become a great nation and through us all nations would be blessed, in Jesus' day, the question was, why are the Romans on every street corner? And why is the king, Herod, who is on the throne, just in the pocket of Rome and extorting our own people? So you have Herod, who's getting wealthy in the extortion of his own people. He's not even a rightful heir to the throne of David. So every different faction of Jews are asking the question, where is God, and what are we supposed to do? And I think, you can go through and look, the Sadducees had an answer, the Herodians had an answer, the Essenes had an answer, right? The Zealots, their answer was just kill them all, revolt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Pharisees' answer was, we just have to follow the law better. Like, God gave us the law of Moses, and Deuteronomy says, if we follow the law, we will be blessed. And if we don't follow the law, we'll be cursed. And so the Pharisees looked at their country and said, there's so much lawlessness. There are so many people breaking the law, that our job as leaders is to teach the law properly, to expose and expel the sinners. And if we can either get people to follow the law or get the lawbreakers out, then maybe God would bless us and we'd be free of the Romans, right? So again, that's a valid point. That's a legitimate understanding of what it meant to be a Jewish leader in that day.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons I think Jesus is particularly in conversation with the Pharisees is because he loves them and he loves their passion for God.
Yeah.
But what he's trying to expose to them is that they're missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
And because what they were saying is that it's all about the boundaries that define us against you. Like circumcision, dietary practices, all of these things that mark us as Jewish, those things in and of themselves are good, right? But when they focused on the boundary and they said the criteria for God's blessing is for you to be inside the boundaries, and if you're outside the boundaries, which they would call sinner, then you are outside of the promise of God. And so Jesus, so this week we're looking at the parable of the lost things, right? And so in the beginning of chapter 15, Luke tells us that the Pharisees looked at Jesus and said, he welcomes and eats with sinners. And they're like, how can he be a good man? And Jesus is like, I think what Jesus is doing is challenging their definition of what is a sinner. And he's just challenging the boundaries.
Yeah.
And so I always, here's another theoretical model I bring in, and I'm not unique in this, but Hebert's theories, set theory, where there's a difference between a bounded set and a centered set, right? I'm sure you've heard that many times, but a bounded set is where you focus in on the boundaries that define a group and everything inside the boundaries are identical. But a centered set is a diversity of things can become a set when they're unified on the thing that centers them. And I think that's what Jesus was inviting the Jews to, is because Jesus is trying to expand the scope of the promise of God outside of these rigid boundaries that the Pharisees were trying to protect to the whole world. Like the
Yeah.
people that you call sinner, God doesn't see them as a sinner. God sees them as a beloved child. And all are welcome. And what centers us is the cross of Christ and the love of God, right? And seeking towards peace and reconciliation. I don't know that. So that's what I think Luke's trying to do. And also Luke is challenging power. And
Yeah.
what, because he continually talks about, he's the king, but he's born in a stable. He, in contrast to Matthew's version of the story, Matthew has the, wealthy people showing up and giving this baby Jesus all these kingly things. But in Luke's Jesus, he's born in a stable, common shepherds visit him, and the Holy Spirit is the one who guides him. And so you have this man of the people who is seeking, who touches the leper, who hangs out with the sinners and the outcasts, and just turns power structures upside down and opens up. Another interesting thing about Luke is, like, when you compare the genealogy of Matthew to the genealogy of Luke, Matthew traces Jesus back to Abraham to show that he's a good Jewish man. But Luke traces Jesus to Abraham, but then also back to Adam, because Luke is trying to show us that the promise of God is for everybody, the whole world,